So I think historians have a really interesting role in our contemporary world. And that is, of course, not only helping us to understand the past, but how we got where we are. And often we're interested in, what we don't remember about the past because our present is so different. And one of the most interesting ways in which our present is different from the 20th century, I would argue, is that in the 20th century, the international was often a space full of politics. And I mean by that, it was a space in which individuals of all kinds, as well as states and empires, engaged larger questions about the world in which we live and how it might be changed, what was wrong with it, what should be fixed. And we can trace that history by looking at the establishment and the creation, the imagination that went behind creating international organisations, but also the ways in which those international organisations functioned as fora for people, often women or other subaltern groups, that didn't have a voice in the nation state or in the empire, and they would turn to the political fora that were available in these international spaces via these international organisations. And in particular, in the 1970s, as the international organisations came to represent a broader cross-section of the world's population, because post-colonial states now existed, there had been decolonisation and they had voices in the General Assembly, but also, all sorts of individuals, including women, had found roles in these international bodies through the 20th century, often when they weren't available in nation states. So when we turn to the international bodies and the kind of politics going on there, particularly from the late 1960s, which we know was a more radical moment politically in the world, in many societies, but in the space of international organisations, a very specific discourse about the planetary and its importance arose. And I think when we look back to that, we find a really interesting kind of precedent for our own engagement with the planetary in the present, both because there are echoes, but because there are so many differences. In the 1970s, the planetary was an idea that was taken up by all sorts of people, including the businessmen who were really interested in international organisations, and it included thinking about how the economy had to be transformed in order to meet the challenges of the planet, which was now understood to have to be experiencing an environmental crisis as a result of industrialisation and the forms of economic practice that had gone on before. So some of this will sound very familiar, but there it is in the 1970s, and it's driving all sorts of really interesting experiments in thinking and in policies. So when we go back to the 1970s, planetary thinking is there, and it's all about a really fundamental need for transforming society, new kinds of economies, and what happened to that idea. That's what historians also have to find out.